The whole county of Harlan's Bluff, Wyoming, knew what Cole Varden was doing to his young wife inside that stone house on the ridge. The deputy knew. The circuit judge knew. The men who drank at the Long Rail Saloon on Friday nights knew. And they raised their glasses anyway, because Cole Varden owned the water rights to half the valley, and in a place where water was life, that made him something close to God. Nora Varden had been 23 years old when she married him. She was 26 now, and she had learned the particular geography of a life lived in fear. Which rooms were safe, which hours were dangerous, which silences meant nothing, and which ones meant she should find a reason to be somewhere else before he found her first. She had not always been this way. There had been a version of her that laughed loudly at supper tables and rode horses, with her hair loose, and argued with her father about things that didn't matter because arguing felt good when you were young, and certain the world was large. That version of her felt like a woman she had read about once in a book, not someone she had actually been. Cole had a gift for revision. He could make you believe that the person you used to be had never existed, and the person you were now, careful, quiet, grateful for small mercies, was who you had always been. He did it so slowly you didn't notice the walls going up until you were already inside them. She had noticed on a Tuesday in October, 3 years into the marriage, when she reached for the jar of coins she kept behind the loose brick in the root cellar, and realized she had been hiding money without ever consciously deciding to. Her hands had been smarter than her head. Her body had understood something her mind was still refusing to name. The jar had $4.60 in it. She sat on the dirt floor of the cellar for a long time with the jar in her lap, listening to the sound of the house above her, calculating. $4.60 would not get her to Laramie. It would barely get her to the next town, but it was $4.60 more than nothing, and she put it back behind the brick and started paying attention to every coin that passed through her hands. Cole was not stupid. That was the thing people outside didn't understand. They pictured men like him as simple, red-faced, obvious. Cole was careful and observant and could read a room the way a riverboat gambler reads faces, knowing what people were holding before they knew it themselves. He had built his operation, the cattle, the water agreements, the arrangements with men in positions of authority, through patience and attention and a precise understanding of what other people needed and how to make himself necessary to them. He applied the same intelligence to Nora. He knew when she had been talking to someone. He knew when she had been somewhere she hadn't told him. He had a way of asking questions that weren't questions, observations that landed like accusations without giving her anything to deny, nothing solid to push back against. "You seem like you've been thinking about something," said pleasantly at dinner while he watched her face. "You seem far away lately." And then he would wait, and whatever she said would somehow become evidence of something she couldn't name. She stopped talking to people. It was easier, less to manage. The coins accumulated, slow and patient the way water wears through stone. A quarter from the grocery change she didn't account for. A dime she found in the mud near the trough. $2 she skimmed carefully from the household money over 6 weeks, a few cents at a time, never enough to show in the ledger. By March, she had $11. By June, she had 19. She moved the hiding spot twice, when instinct told her to, without knowing why. She had no plan beyond the money. She knew she needed to go north, because north was away, and away was the only direction that made sense. She had no family left, that Cole hadn't poisoned against her. Her father believed whatever Cole told him, which was that Nora was ungrateful and difficult, and Cole bore it with patience. Her one close friend from before the marriage had stopped writing after Nora failed to respond to 3 letters, which she had never received, because Cole sorted the mail. She understood, by the 2nd year, that she was entirely alone. The understanding didn't break her the way she expected it might. It clarified things. When there is no one coming for you, you stop waiting and start thinking. The morning, everything changed. She had $24 in the root cellar and a bruise along her left jaw from the night before that she'd covered with the collar of her dress. She had gone to town for flour and salt, in the small list of things Cole had approved, which he reviewed each time she went to confirm she hadn't bought anything beyond it. She had exactly the right amount of money for what was on the list. She had learned not to deviate. She was in Pritchard's general store, standing at the counter waiting for Emmett Pritchard to weigh out the flour, when the door opened behind her and Cole came in. She knew his footsteps. She had memorized them the way a person memorizes the particular sound of a bad step on a staircase, automatically, as a matter of survival. She didn't turn around. She didn't adjust her posture or her expression, because he was watching for exactly that, for the flinch that told him her conscience was working. "Thought you'd be done by now," he said. His voice was pleasant, always pleasant in public. "Emmett's weighing the flour," she said. Cole came to stand beside her at the counter. He looked at the list on the counter, and he looked at the coins she had laid out, and he counted them with his eyes, the way he always did. She had the right amount. She always had the right amount. She always had the right amount. It was while Cole was doing his accounting that the front door of Pritchard's opened again. She didn't look up immediately. There was no reason to. Strangers passed through Harlan's Bluff with some regularity, traveling men, cattle buyers, the occasional surveyor from the land office. She was aware of someone tall entering, of the draft of cold air from outside, of Emmett glancing up and then going carefully neutral in the way small-town storekeepers go neutral when they're not certain about a man. Cole looked up. She felt him do it. Felt the subtle change in how he was standing. "You need something?" Cole said, not unfriendly, assessing. "Just passing through," the man said. His voice was unhurried and low, the kind of voice that didn't feel the need to fill space. "Heard you at a telegraph office." "Down the street," Emmett offered. Obliged. He should have left them. He didn't. Nora became aware that he was still standing inside the door, and she finally looked. He was not what she expected. She wasn't sure what she had expected. Something obvious. Some visual signal of threat or salvation. He was simply a man, trail-worn, with a dark beard going longer than fashion, wearing a canvas coat, patched at the elbows and carrying himself with a kind of stillness that suggested he had been alone in large empty spaces for a long time and had made peace with it. His eyes moved over the store in a methodical way, not nervous, just cataloging. They moved over Cole and then over her, and they stopped. She looked away first. "You're tracking mud," Cole said, still pleasant. "I'll clean it," the man said. "I'm saying it'd be better if you finished your business and moved along." There was a pause. In the pause, Emmett found something to do with his hands that required him to look at the counter. "I'll move along when I've got what I need," the man said, in the same tone he'd used to say everything else. No heat in it, no invitation to escalate. Cole turned back to the counter. His hand found Nora's elbow. She felt his fingers close, that familiar pressure that was not quite pain, but was the warning of pain. The reminder of what his hands could do, in a house where no one was watching. "She's fine," said the man from the door. Cole turned slowly. "What did you say?" "I said she's fine. She can walk out of a store on her own." He looked at Cole with the same flat patience he'd used on everything else. "So you can let go of her arm." The silence in Pritchard's general store was absolute. Emmett had stopped breathing. The boy sweeping in the back had gone still. Cole released her arm. He released it because a man like Cole understood leverage, and he understood that a public confrontation with a stranger he knew nothing about was leverage he couldn't control. His smile came back. "Just walking my wife out." "Sure," the man said. Nora picked up her flour and her salt. She walked out of the store without looking at the man in the canvas coat, without looking at Cole, keeping her eyes on the door and then on the street outside, and then on the wagon, going through the routine of it with the calm of someone who has learned that visible feeling costs you. Cole came out behind her. He helped her with the flour, the way he always did in public. He smiled at the two men standing outside the feed store across the street. He had a gift for smiling. On the ride home, he didn't speak. She watched the road ahead and did her arithmetic. 19 miles to the Cotter relay station. From there, a coach ran north every Wednesday. It was Thursday today. A week and a day. She had $24. A coach ticket to Laramie was $12. She would have $12 left, which was not much but was something. And in Laramie she did not know a soul, which meant there was also no one who would send word back to Cole. That night, she found 2 more quarters behind the lining of her winter coat. Money she had hidden so long ago she had forgotten it. And she sat with them in her palm in the dark and thought, "I am getting out of here." She did not know the stranger's name. She did not expect to see him again. He had said 6 words or some small number like that. And then he had been done, and she understood that was the kind of man he was. Someone who did the thing that needed doing and then returned to silence. She had not needed more than 6 words. She had needed someone to see what was happening, to name it plainly in front of witnesses. And he had done that. And somewhere in her chest something that had been compressed for 3 years shifted slightly, the way a stone shifts when the water finally works its way beneath it. She put the quarters behind the brick and went to bed. The week that followed was the longest of her life and also the most focused. She had been living in a fog of survival, reactive, careful, all her energy spent on reading Cole and managing Cole and not giving Cole any purchase. For the first time in years, she had something else to think about. A point on the horizon instead of just the ground directly in front of her feet. She organized herself quietly in small pieces. A dress and her mother's locket wrapped in the flour sack and pushed behind the root cellar's south wall. Her boots rizzled in secret, paid for with coins from the jar when Cole was in Casper for 2 days on cattle business. She thought about what she was walking into. Laramie was a city to her, though she had been told it was not large. She had skills. She could sew, she could cook, she could keep accounts. Her handwriting was precise, and her arithmetic clean. There were things a woman could do if she was willing to work, and she was willing. She had been working for 3 years at the hardest job she had ever had, which was existing in close proximity to Cole Varden without disappearing entirely. Anything after this would be easier. She said a careful goodbye to the ridge and the stone house and the mountains. She could see from the kitchen window, which were beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with Cole, and that she had loved quietly since the first week of her marriage, in the brief period before she understood what she had walked into. The mountains would exist without her watching them. She told herself this, and it helped some. On Wednesday morning, she said she was going to town for thread. Cole looked at her for a moment. That look she knew. The one that was measuring something she couldn't see. And then he said to be back by midday. She said she would. She went to the root cellar first. She took the jar and the flour sack, and she walked, not rode, because the wagon was too visible, along the creek bed to the road, and then along the road north. And she did not look back at the house on the ridge. She had said her goodbye. Looking back was for people who weren't sure, and she was sure. It was 11 miles on foot to the Cotter relay station, which was more than she had anticipated, but the morning was cold and clear, and her boots held. She had brought enough water and half a loaf of bread from the kitchen, cut without ceremony, and wrapped in cloth. She ate while walking, because there was no reason to stop. She was 6 miles out when she heard hoofbeats behind her on the road. Her first thought was Cole. Her body moved, before her mind did, stepping off the road toward the creek brush, calculating cover and distance, and how much time she had. And then the horse came around the low bend, and she saw that it was not Cole's roan, was not a horse she recognized, was a dark bay, with road dust on its legs, and the man riding it was wearing a canvas coat, patched at the elbows. He pulled up even with her position in the brush and looked down. "Heading north," he said. She came out from the brush because there was no point in hiding from a man who had already seen her. "Yes," she said. "Cotter Station." "Yes." He looked at the road ahead and then at her boots and then at her face. He didn't look at the flour sack or the jar she had put inside it, though she was aware of both in a heightened way. "Get on," he said. "I'm going north." She considered him. She had been very careful for 3 years, and she had learned that caution was not the same as fear, that caution was intelligence, and that sometimes intelligence looked like accepting a situation honestly. She had been alone on this road for 6 miles, and she would be alone for 5 more. And the man who had gotten between her and Cole's hand in Pritchard's store was offering her a horse. "I don't know your name," she said. "James Calloway," he said. "Nora?" She had not told him her name. She looked at him. "Cole said it," he said, "in the store, when he came in." She remembered. Cole had said, "Nora, let's go," the pleasantness of it. She took the hand James held down to her, and put her foot in the stirrup and got up behind him, and the bay moved forward on the road north. They didn't speak for a while. This was not uncomfortable. She had grown unaccustomed to comfortable silences, had spent 3 years in silences that were loaded with calculation and threat, and a silence that was simply A silence was something she had forgotten existed. She became aware, slowly, that this was what it felt like to sit next to someone who was not measuring her. "Where are you going?" she asked when they were 3 miles on. "Montana," he said, eventually. "What's in Montana?" "Quiet," he said. "And I've got a piece of land near the Judith Basin I've been meaning to get back to." She thought about a piece of land near the Judith Basin. She thought about quiet. "Do you know what you're leaving?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Good. Some people don't. They leave and then they try to explain it, talk themselves into it after the fact. Easier if you know before you go." She didn't ask how he knew she was leaving, or how he happened to be on the road north. She suspected he had seen something in Pritchard's store that she had not been able to see from inside her own life. The whole shape of it, visible to someone standing outside. Men like Cole cast shadows, and the shadows had a particular shape if you knew what you were looking at. "He'll come after me," she said. "He might," James said. "He'll go to the station first. Then he'll figure out you took the coach. He won't know where you got off." "I don't know where I'm getting off," she said. "No," he said. "That's useful." She had not thought of it that way, of not knowing as a form of protection, of her own uncertainty as a wall between herself and Cole's precision. Cole needed to know things. He needed the map of a situation before he would move in it. She was, for the first time in 3 years, beyond the edges of his map. At the Cotter station, James Calloway stayed outside with the horse while she went in and bought a ticket. The woman at the window had the carefully uninvolved expression of someone who processed a great many departures and had learned not to ask about them. Nora put down her $12 and received a ticket and a departure time of 2 o'clock. She came outside. 2 hours, she said. James nodded. He had gotten down from the horse and was watering it at the trough. He didn't seem in a hurry to go anywhere. There was a bench outside the station, and she sat on it. The cold was settling in now that she'd stopped walking, and she pulled her coat tighter. She put the flour sack on the bench beside her and looked at the mountains, different mountains from the ones she could see from Cole's kitchen window, but the same mountains in the way that matters. Old and indifferent and beautiful without asking permission to be. "What will you do?" James asked from the trough. "Find work," she said. "I can sew. I can keep accounts." "Then lure me?" "To start." She had not thought further than starting, but starting was enough. The territory between starting and whatever came after was just territory, space to move through, which was all the future ever was. He came and stood near the station wall, out of the wind, and they waited together in the quiet. She thought about the house on the ridge and what Cole would find when he came back, and she was not there. She thought about the look that would cross his face. Not grief, because Cole did not feel things that way, but the particular cold anger of a man who has had something taken from him that he considered his. She did not feel guilty. She noticed the absence of guilt with a kind of careful interest. The way you notice the absence of a sound that has been so constant you stopped hearing it. She was not something that could be taken. She was a woman sitting on a bench outside a relay station in Wyoming in early spring, with $12 and a flour sack and a ticket north. And she had gotten here on her own 2 feet. And whatever came next, she had done this first. That was a fact that belonged entirely to her. "You don't have to be afraid of what's coming," James said. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the road. "I know," she said. "You've been afraid for a while. It'll feel strange when it stops." She thought about this. "Has it stopped for you?" He was quiet for a moment. "Mostly," he said. She didn't ask what he had been afraid of. That felt like his in the way the jar of coins and the flour sack were hers. Private architecture, built in the dark, belonging to whoever built it. The coach came at 2:15. The driver loaded 2 other passengers, a traveling salesman with more luggage than sense, and an older woman going to see her daughter. And then he loaded Nora's flour sack and told her to board. She stood on the step and looked back at James Calloway, who was still leaning against the station wall with his hands in the pockets of the canvas coat. He had not offered to come with her, and she had not asked him to. And this was correct. She was not trading one man's direction for another's. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. "The Judith Basin," she said. "Is it as quiet as you said?" Something moved behind his eyes. "Quieter," he said. She got in the coach. As it pulled away, she looked out the window at the road unreeling behind her, and she did not look for James Calloway, and she did not look in the direction of Harlan's Bluff. She looked at the road ahead, where it curved north into the foothills, where the light was the particular pale gold of late afternoon in the high country, where it was possible to imagine that the woman sitting in this coach with her coat pulled tight and her mother's locket against her collarbone was not someone escaping but someone arriving. That was the shift, and it was small, and it was everything. 3 years was a season. A hard season, a long winter. The kind that makes you think spring isn't coming, and then one morning the ground changes underfoot, and you realize you've been walking toward it all along. Nora Varden had packed one dress and $12 and the locket her mother left her, and she was going north, and she was not going to explain herself to anyone, not even herself. She had gotten out. She was out. She turned away from the back window and looked forward, at the road, and then past the road at the mountains, rising clean and cold and without any particular interest in her situation, which was exactly the kind of company she needed. The coach rounded the bend, and Harlan's Bluff fell away behind her, and she let it go, and did not bring it back. What I keep coming back to is the jar. Not the coach ticket. Not the confrontation in the store. Not even the moment Nora finally walked out of that root cellar with everything she owned folded into a flour sack. What stays with me is the image of her sitting on that dirt floor, holding $4.60, realizing her hands had been smarter than her head. She had been saving herself before she gave herself permission to. That's what people miss when they look at a story like this from the outside. They want to find the turning point, the dramatic moment, the rescuer on horseback, the 5 words that changed everything. And yes, James said what needed to be said in that store. But he didn't save Nora. She had already been saving herself, coin by coin, in the dark, alone. He just held a door open that she had already been walking toward. I think about what it takes to do what she did, and I don't think it's one thing. It's 3 things working together, and when any one of them is missing, people stay stuck. The first is a kind of basic decency toward yourself. The understanding that what is being done to you is wrong, not because someone told you so, but because you feel the wrongness of it in your body before your mind catches up. Nora didn't have a counselor or a support system or anyone in her corner. What she had was an intact moral compass that Cole couldn't quite destroy, no matter how carefully he tried. She knew, somewhere below the fog of survival, that this was not what a life was supposed to look like, that quiet knowing is its own form of integrity. And it's harder to hold on to than people realize when the person controlling your world is very good at making you doubt what you see. The second is clear thinking under pressure. Cole was intelligent. He was strategic. He read people well and used what he learned. Nora survived 3 years in proximity to that by becoming more precise, not less, by calculating, planning, hiding money in the exact amounts that wouldn't show in the ledger, by understanding that her uncertainty about the future was not a weakness, but a kind of protection. She didn't outmuscle Cole. She outthought him, quietly, in the margins of her own life. That's not luck. That's a trained mind working under conditions most people will never face. The third is the part I find hardest to explain, because it's not dramatic. It doesn't look like courage from the outside. It looks like a woman walking 11 miles on a cold morning because she decided she was done. Nora didn't wait for the right moment, the right person, the right circumstances. She got up, and she moved, and she kept moving, and she didn't look back at the house on the ridge, because she had already said her goodbye, and she meant it, that kind of persistence. The unglamorous, feet on ground, one step then the next kind, is what actually gets people out of the places they're stuck in. Cole got what Cole built. A man who constructs his life around controlling others ends up with nothing that was ever genuinely his, and he knows it, even if he never says so. What Nora had, even in the worst of it, was herself. She never stopped being hers. And when she finally let herself act on that, there was nothing Cole's money or his arrangements or his careful reading of rooms could do about it. The coach rounded the bend, and she didn't bring it back. I think about that image when I feel like I'm not moving fast enough, not brave enough, not ready enough. She wasn't ready either. She had $12 in a flour sack in a direction. That was enough. It turned out That was exactly enough.